The night rests gently over the land. It is wide and quiet, stretching far beyond what the eye can see. The sky above is deep and soft, filled with countless small stars that shine without flicker. They do not hurry. They simply remain, steady and patient, watching over the earth below. Beneath that sky, the Nile moves. It does not rush. It does not change its mind. It flows in a calm and steady line, as it has for thousands of years. The water is dark now, reflecting only pieces of the sky, broken gently by its slow movement. Along the edges, tall reeds stand in silence, their thin shapes barely moving in the faint night air. The land beside the river is still. A small village rests there, close to the water, as if it leans toward it in quiet trust. The homes are simple. They are shaped by hands that know the earth well. Mud bricks, pressed and dried under the sun, form thick walls that keep the heat away during the day and hold a gentle warmth during the night. The rooftops are flat. Some are covered with woven mats. Some are bare, holding the memory of many days of sunlight. There are no bright colors here, only soft tones of brown and sand blending into the land itself. Inside the homes, people sleep. They lie on simple mats made of reeds or woven fibers. Their bodies rest close to the ground where the air is cooler. The silence inside is soft and complete, broken only by slow breathing, steady and calm. A child shifts slightly in sleep. A hand rests loosely beside them. The faint scent of dust and dried grass lingers in the room. Somewhere in the corner, a clay jar holds water collected from the river earlier in the day. The water is still now, untouched, waiting for morning. Outside, the world is not empty. It moves in quiet ways. Small insects drift through the air, their wings making sounds so soft they almost disappear. A night bird calls from somewhere near the riverbank, its voice low and distant. In the reeds, something small and careful moves, stepping lightly through the narrow paths between the stems. The air carries a gentle warmth, left behind by the sun that has long since disappeared. But now, that warmth is fading. Slowly, almost without notice, the coolness of night settles in. Time passes. It does not announce itself. It simply continues, one moment slipping into the next. The stars begin to change. At first, it is difficult to notice. They are still there, still shining, but slowly, very slowly, the darkness around them begins to soften. A faint line of pale gray appears along the edge of the horizon. Morning is approaching. Inside one of the homes, a man begins to wake. His eyes open slightly, then close again, then open once more. He does not move right away. He listens first. This is how waking begins here, not with sudden motion, but with awareness. The world is still quiet. He takes a slow breath. The air feels different now, cooler, lighter. He sits up. The mat beneath him shifts with a soft sound. He places his hand on the ground beside him, steadying himself. For a moment, he remains still, allowing the last traces of sleep to fade away. Nearby, a clay jar rests against the wall. He reaches for it, his fingers brushing lightly against its smooth surface. He lifts it carefully and brings it close. The water moves gently, making a faint sound. He drinks. The taste is simple, slightly warm, carrying the quiet presence of the Nile. This is enough. He sets the jar down and rises to his feet. Outside, the sky continues to change. The gray grows lighter, slowly becoming a soft blue. The stars begin to disappear, not at once, but one by one, as if they are stepping back to make room for the day. Inside another home, a woman wakes. She moves quietly, careful not to disturb the others. Her steps are soft against the ground. She reaches for a small container, lifting the lid with steady hands. Inside there is grain, dry, pale, collected and stored carefully over many days. She carries it to a flat stone. Then she begins to grind. The sound is low and steady, stone against stone, a slow, repeating motion that fills the quiet space with a gentle rhythm. This sound belongs to the morning. It has always belonged to the morning. As she works, the light grows stronger outside. A faint golden tone begins to spread across the horizon. It touches the edges of the homes, the narrow paths between them, the still surface of the river. The village begins to stir. A door opens with a soft creak, then another. Footsteps appear in the dust outside, fresh and clear. A child steps out, blinking in the growing light. The air is changing. It is no longer cool. The warmth of the coming day begins to rise, gently at first, then more clearly. Men prepare for the day. Some gather simple tools, wooden handles, stone edges, worn smooth by use. These tools are not new. They do not need to be. They have served well, and they will continue to serve. Others walk toward the river. Boats rest there, tied carefully to wooden posts driven into the soft ground. The water moves around them, quiet and steady. A man steps into one of the boats, testing its balance, adjusting a rope, making sure everything is as it should be. There is no hurry. There is always time. The Nile does not rush, and neither do the people who live beside it. In the distance, fields stretch across the land. The soil is dark and soft, shaped by the floodwaters that came months before. When the river rises, it spreads across the land, covering everything in a slow, quiet wave. When it retreats, it leaves behind a layer of rich earth. This is what the people depend on. This is what allows them to live. A man walks toward the fields now. His feet are bare. The ground beneath them feels cool, but not cold. Each step presses lightly into the soil, leaving a brief mark that will soon fade. He carries his tools over his shoulder. They are simple, but they are enough. The light continues to grow. The sun has not yet fully risen, but its presence is already felt. The sky shifts into soft shades of gold and pale blue. Shadows stretch long across the ground, thin and quiet. Birds begin to move. They lift gently into the air, their wings catching the first light. Their calls are soft, not sharp, rising and falling like a calm breath. The man reaches the edge of the field. He pauses. He looks out across the land. There is no need to think too much. The work is known. It is the same work that was done yesterday and the day before and the day before that. There is comfort in this. There is peace in repetition. He steps forward. The soil gives slightly beneath his feet, and the day begins, slowly, quietly, without effort, just as it always has.
The man steps into the field, and the earth receives him without resistance. The soil is soft from the memory of water, holding a quiet richness beneath its surface. Each step presses gently downward, leaving a shape that will not last for long. The land here is patient. It does not hold on to marks for very long. It simply allows them to come and go. He lowers his tools to the ground. For a moment, he stands still again. There is no rush to begin. The morning is still young, and the air carries a calm that has not yet been disturbed by the full heat of the sun. The light stretches across the field in long, quiet lines, touching everything softly. In the distance, the Nile continues its steady movement. It is never truly silent, though it feels that way. If one listens closely, there is always a faint sound, a soft shifting of water, a gentle brushing along the riverbank, a quiet presence that never leaves. The man bends slightly and presses his hand into the soil. He feels its texture. This is something he has done many times before. It is not a new action. It is not even something he thinks about very much. It is simply part of the rhythm of the day. The earth speaks in simple ways, and he understands. Nearby, another figure approaches. A second man walking at the same slow pace, carrying similar tools. They do not call out to each other. There is no need for greeting. Their presence is enough. They stand side by side for a moment, looking across the field. Then, without speaking, they begin their work. The motion is steady, measured. The tools move through the soil with a quiet sound, breaking the surface just enough to prepare it. There is no forceful action, only repetition, only patience. The sun rises a little higher. The light grows warmer, spreading across the land in soft layers. Shadows begin to shorten, pulling closer to the bodies that cast them. The air shifts gently, losing the last trace of night. Back in the village, the morning continues to unfold. The woman who was grinding grain has finished her task. A fine powder now rests on the flat stone, pale and soft. She gathers it carefully, placing it into a simple container. Her movements are slow and certain, shaped by habit. She adds water, not too much, just enough. Her hands work the mixture gently, pressing and folding, turning it into dough. It is a quiet process, one that asks for attention but not urgency. The texture changes slowly under her touch, becoming smooth and ready. A small fire is prepared nearby. The flames are not large, they do not need to be. The heat builds slowly, rising upward, carrying with it the faint scent of burning wood and dry grass. She places the dough onto a flat surface near the fire and waits. Waiting is part of everything here. There is no impatience in it, only a steady understanding that things will happen when they are ready. Outside, children begin to move through the village paths. Their steps are light, their voices soft. They are not loud in the morning. The day has only just begun, and even they seem to understand the quiet that still lingers in the air. One child pauses near the edge of the village. They look toward the river. The water glows now under the rising sun, its surface turning from dark to gold. Small ripples move slowly outward, catching the light in gentle patterns. A bird lands near the water's edge. It stands still for a moment, then dips its head, then lifts it again. The movement is simple, repeated, unchanging. The child watches. There is no hurry to do anything else. Time feels wide in the morning. Back in the field, the men continue their work. Their movements remain steady, unbroken. The soil shifts beneath their tools, turning slowly, preparing itself for what will come next. There is no loud sound, only the soft rhythm of effort meeting earth. The sun rises a little higher. The warmth becomes more noticeable now. It settles onto the skin, not harsh, but present. The air begins to thicken slightly, holding the promise of a hotter day ahead. Still, the men do not stop. They do not need to. Their bodies are used to this. This is not new. This is life as it has always been.
A breeze moves across the field. It is light, almost unnoticed, but it carries with it the scent of the river, a faint mixture of water, plants, and wet earth. It passes over them, then continues on, disappearing just as quietly as it came. One of the men pauses. He straightens his back slowly, placing his hand against his side for a moment, not from pain, but from the simple need to rest. He looks up. The sky is now clear and open, a soft blue stretching in every direction. There are no clouds, only light. He takes a breath, then returns to his work. In the village, the bread is nearly ready. The surface has changed color slightly, becoming firmer, holding its shape. She turns it carefully, adjusting its place near the fire. The smell begins to spread. It is warm and simple, filling the small space, drifting out through the doorway and into the open air. It is a familiar smell, one that belongs to every morning. A man enters the home. He says nothing. He does not need to. He sits near the doorway, where the light falls softly across the floor. He waits. Soon the bread will be shared. Not in a rush, not in large portions. Just enough. Always just enough. The day continues to move, slowly, steadily, the same as it did yesterday, the same as it will tomorrow. The Nile flows, the fields breathe, the village lives, and everything unfolds in its own quiet time.
The bread is lifted gently from the warmth of the fire. It is not rushed. The woman's hands move with care, turning it slightly, feeling its surface, sensing when it is ready without needing to look too closely. The heat has done its work slowly, shaping the dough into something firm, something nourishing. She places it onto a simple surface. For a moment, it rests. The warmth rises from it in soft waves, carrying a quiet scent into the air. It is a smell that belongs to the morning, steady and familiar, repeating day after day without change. The man sitting near the doorway reaches forward. He breaks a small piece. There is no sound beyond the gentle tearing of bread. He holds it for a moment before eating, as if allowing the warmth to settle into his hand. Then he takes a slow bite. There is no hurry in eating. Each movement is simple, measured. Outside, the village continues its quiet rhythm. More people have stepped out into the light now. The paths between the homes begin to show signs of use, footprints layered gently over one another, soft marks in the dust that tell a quiet story of movement. A woman walks toward the river carrying a clay jar. She holds it against her side, steady and balanced. The jar is not light, but she carries it without strain. This is something she has done many times before. The path to the river is familiar. It curves slightly, moving between small clusters of reeds and open spaces of dry earth. The ground is uneven in places, but her steps adjust without thought. As she walks, the sound of the village fades slightly behind her. In its place, the quiet presence of the Nile grows stronger. The water moves in its steady way, never stopping, never changing its pace. When she reaches the edge, she pauses. She looks out across the surface. The sunlight now rests fully upon it, turning it into a wide sheet of soft gold. Small ripples pass across it, gentle and endless. She kneels. Carefully, she lowers the jar into the water. There is a soft sound as it fills. The river accepts the jar without resistance, just as it accepts everything. When she lifts it again, it is heavier now, filled with what the day will need. She stands. For a moment, she remains still.
Then she turns and begins the walk back. In the fields, the work continues. The men move slowly, their actions unchanged. The soil has been turned in long, quiet lines. The pattern spreads across the land, simple and steady, shaped by hands that follow memory more than thought. The sun climbs higher. The warmth deepens. It settles onto the earth, onto the skin, into the air itself. Shadows grow shorter now, pulling close to the feet, no longer stretching across the ground as they did before. Still, the pace does not change. There is no need. One of the men reaches for a small container. He opens it and drinks. The water is no longer cool, but it is enough. It carries the same faint taste of the river, a quiet reminder of where everything comes from. He closes the container and sets it down, then continues. In another part of the village, a child sits near the entrance of a home. They hold a small object in their hands. It is simple, shaped from clay, worn slightly at the edges. Perhaps it was made not long ago. Perhaps it has been used many times. The child turns it slowly. There is no purpose beyond the moment itself, no urgency, no expectation. The world around them moves, but they remain still, watching, holding, existing quietly within the morning. Nearby, an older figure sits in the shade. Their movements are slower, more deliberate. They watch the village with calm eyes, seeing not just what is happening now, but what has happened many times before. The same paths, the same actions, the same quiet rhythm repeating itself across days, across seasons, across years. Nothing feels new, and yet nothing feels old. It simply continues. The air shifts again. A slight breeze passes through the village, moving between the homes, brushing against walls, lifting small traces of dust before letting them settle again. It carries with it faint sounds, distant voices, soft movements, the gentle life of the village unfolding without effort. Back at the river, a small boat drifts slightly against its rope. A man stands within it. He adjusts something near the edge, checking the position of a net, making sure it rests as it should. His movements are careful, unhurried. The water touches the sides of the boat in quiet, repeating sounds. There is no tension here, only routine, only familiarity. He looks out across the Nile. The far bank rests in the distance, softened by light. Palm trees rise there, their shapes still against the sky. The land stretches beyond, wide and silent. He does not need to go far. Everything he needs is here. Everything has always been here. The day moves forward. The morning slowly becomes something more. The light grows stronger. The warmth deepens. And yet the rhythm remains unchanged. In the fields, in the homes, by the river, life continues in the same quiet pattern. No sudden movements, no sharp changes, only the steady unfolding of time, like the river, like the breath, like the soft turning of the earth beneath the sun. And as the sun rises higher still, the village settles in to the fullness of the day, not with noise, not with urgency, but with a calm, unbroken flow that carries everything gently forward.
The sun continues its slow climb across the sky. It does not rush. It rises with quiet certainty, moving higher little by little until its warmth becomes something that can no longer be ignored. The light, once soft and pale, now settles more firmly across the land, pressing gently against every surface. The village begins to feel different. The coolness of the morning has faded. In its place, a steady warmth spreads through the air, through the walls of the homes, through the ground itself.
The mud bricks, once holding the night's softness, now begin to gather heat again. In the fields, the men pause. Not all at once, one at a time. A tool is set down, a back straightens slowly. A hand moves to wipe across the forehead, brushing away the quiet presence of sweat. There is no signal to stop, no voice calling out, only a shared understanding that this is the time to rest. They move toward the edge of the field, where a small area of shade waits beneath a simple structure made of wood and woven reeds. It does not block all the light, but it softens it, turning the harsh brightness into something more gentle. They sit. The ground beneath them is warm, but not uncomfortable. It holds the heat of the day in a steady way, like everything else here. For a while, they say nothing. Their breathing slows. The rhythm of work fades into the rhythm of rest. One of them reaches for a small bundle. Inside, there is bread. Simple, dry, enough. He breaks it into pieces, handing some to the others. The movement is quiet, practiced, without need for words. Each takes what is given, not more, not less. They eat slowly. There is no rush to finish, no reason to hurry the moment. The taste is plain, but it is familiar, and that is enough. A faint breeze moves across the field. It comes from the direction of the river, carrying a touch of moisture, a softness that eases the weight of the heat. It passes over them, then continues on, slipping through the open land and into the village beyond. In the village, the midday stillness begins to settle. The paths grow quieter. Fewer footsteps move across the dust. The activity of the morning has softened, replaced by a slower pace. People retreat into the shaded spaces of their homes, where the light does not reach as strongly. Inside one home, a woman sits near the wall. The air here is cooler. The thick mud bricks hold back much of the heat, creating a space where the body can rest. She leans slightly, her back supported, her hands resting in her lap. For a time, she closes her eyes, not fully asleep, not fully awake, just resting. The quiet wraps around her gently. Outside, the sunlight continues to press against the earth. The sky remains clear, open, without clouds. The light falls straight down now, no longer angled, no longer soft. The shadows are small. They gather close beneath objects, offering only narrow places of relief. Near the river, the water reflects the brightness. It shimmers now, the surface alive with tiny movements of light. The steady flow continues unchanged, carrying its quiet motion through the heat of the day. A man stands at the edge. He bends slightly and dips his hands into the water. For a moment, he holds them there. The coolness is immediate. It does not last long once he lifts them again, but it is enough. A brief pause, a small relief. He wipes his hands across his arms, letting the moisture settle before it fades. Then he sits nearby in the narrow shade of a tree. The tree is not large. Its leaves are sparse, but they offer just enough shelter to soften the sun. The ground beneath it is marked by many moments like this, people sitting, resting, waiting for the heat to pass. Time moves differently now, more slowly. Each moment stretches slightly, not because it is changed, but because the body feels it more. The warmth makes everything softer, quieter, more still. Even the animals move less. A small goat lies near the side of a home, its body still, its breathing slow. It does not wander now. It waits, just like the people, for the day to shift again. In the fields, the men remain in the shade. One leans back, resting on his hands, looking out across the land. The soil they have worked lies in quiet lines before them, unchanged since they paused. There is no pressure to continue yet. The day is long. There will be time. Another man lowers his head slightly. His eyes close. For a few moments he drifts into a light sleep, carried there by the warmth, by the steady rhythm of the morning's work, by the simple need to rest. No one disturbs him. There is an understanding here. Rest is part of the day, just as work is. The breeze returns again, soft and uneven. It moves across the surface of the land, lifting small grains of dust, carrying faint scents, the river, the earth, the quiet life of the village. Then it fades. The sun remains. But slowly, almost too slowly to notice, it begins its long journey downward. The light will change again. The heat will ease. The shadows will return, and the rhythm of the day will shift once more. For now, everything remains still, held gently in the warmth of midday, suspended between the work of the morning and the calm of the evening.
The stillness of midday lingers for a while longer. It does not disappear quickly. It softens, little by little, almost unnoticed at first. The air remains warm, but something within it begins to shift. The weight of the heat slowly loosens, making space for movement again. In the fields, one of the men opens his eyes. He has been resting only lightly, never fully asleep, but the quiet pause has been enough. He sits up slowly, placing his hands against the ground, feeling its warmth still gathered beneath him. He looks toward the sky. The sun has moved. Not far, but enough. It no longer sits directly above. Its light has begun to lean slightly, changing the way it falls across the land. The brightness is still strong, but the sharpness has softened just a little. He rises. There is no signal, no spoken word. The others begin to move as well, one after another, as if guided by the same quiet understanding. Tools are lifted again, hands returning to their familiar tasks. The work continues. Not faster, not slower, just as before. The soil receives each movement in the same patient way, shifting gently under the pressure of the tools. The lines in the field grow longer, more complete, stretching across the earth in steady patterns. A breeze returns, slightly stronger now. It moves across the open land, passing through the fields, carrying with it a sense of change. It is not cool, but it is different. It brings motion where there was stillness. In the village, doors begin to open again. The quiet rest of midday fades. People step back into the light, adjusting slowly to the brightness that still fills the air. The paths, once empty, begin to show movement once more. A woman steps outside carrying a bundle of reeds. She walks to a shaded area near her home and sits down. Her hands begin to work the reeds carefully, bending them, weaving them together in slow, practiced motions. There is no urgency. Each movement follows the last, steady and calm. The shape begins to form gradually, a mat perhaps, or a simple basket. It is not important to finish quickly. It is only important to continue. Nearby, another figure shapes clay. The earth has been gathered earlier, taken near the river where it is soft and easy to form. Now it rests in their hands, turning slowly, pressed and smoothed into shape. A bowl begins to appear, simple, round, useful. The fingers move along its surface, correcting small imperfections, not for beauty, but for balance. The clay responds quietly, holding each touch, each adjustment. It will be left to dry later under the sun, becoming something firm and lasting. Near the river, the afternoon brings gentle activity. The water remains steady, unchanged in its quiet flow, but along its edges, people move with soft purpose. A small group stands near a boat. They adjust a net, checking its knots, smoothing its edges. The fibers are rough but strong, made to endure the repeated use of many days. One man steps into the boat.
It shifts slightly under his weight, rocking gently against the water. He steadies himself without effort. This is a motion he knows well. Another pushes the boat lightly from the shore. It drifts away, slowly, carried by the calm movement of the Nile. The man inside takes hold of a simple pole, guiding the boat without force, only gentle direction. The water accepts the movement. It does not resist. The boat becomes part of its flow. Back in the village, children move through the paths again. Their steps are a little more lively now, though still soft compared to the noise of later hours. They follow each other, stopping and starting, picking up small objects from the ground, then setting them down again. One pauses near a wall. They trace a line in the dust with their finger, then another. There is no pattern that needs to be followed, only the quiet act of creating, then leaving it behind. An older figure watches from nearby. Sitting once again in the shade, they observe the slow return of movement to the village. Their expression does not change much, but their eyes follow the small details, the weaving hands, the drifting boat, the children moving through light and shadow. All of it is familiar. All of it has happened before. The afternoon continues. The sun lowers a little more. The shadows begin to stretch again, just slightly, reaching outward from the homes, from the trees, from the figures moving through the land. The air becomes easier to breathe, not cool, but softer. In the fields, the men continue their work, but now there is a quiet awareness that the day is moving forward. The long stretch of labor is slowly nearing its end. The body feels it. The mind knows it without needing to think. One man pauses again. He stands upright, looking across the field. The lines they have worked are clear now, spread across the land in calm order. There is a sense of completion, though not everything is finished. There will always be more to do. But for today, this is enough. He lifts his tool once more, not with effort, but with the simple intention to continue just a little longer. The breeze moves again. The river flows. The village breathes. And the afternoon carries everything forward, slowly, gently, without interruption.
The afternoon begins to soften. It does not change all at once. The warmth of the day still rests over the land, but it no longer feels as heavy. Delight, once direct and strong, begins to lean at a gentle angle, stretching slowly across the fields and the village. In the distance, the sun moves lower. It is not something that demands attention. It simply happens, quietly, steadily, just as everything else does. In the fields, the men feel the shift before they fully see it. The air is easier now. Each breath comes without effort. The ground beneath their feet still holds the heat of the day, but it is beginning to release it slowly, letting it rise and fade into the open sky. One man pauses again. He places his tool down and rests his hands at his sides. His shoulders lower slightly, as if they have been carrying something that is now being set aside. He looks toward the horizon. The light has changed. It is softer now, touched with a faint warmth that is different from the brightness of midday. There is a quiet color beginning to form, something gentle and calm. Around him, the others begin to slow their movements. There is no clear moment when work ends. It fades, just as the light fades. Tools are lifted one last time, then lowered again. Hands brush lightly against clothing, clearing away dust that will soon return. Feet shift in the soil, leaving the last impressions of the day. They begin to walk back, not in a line, not in any particular order, just moving in the same direction, toward the village, toward the familiar shapes of home. Their steps are steady but unhurried. There is no need to arrive quickly. The day is ending, and it will end whether they hurry or not. Behind them, the field remains, quiet, ordered, waiting for another day. The breeze continues to move across the land. It feels different now, softer, carrying with it the first hint of evening. It passes through the open spaces, across the surface of the Nile, through the narrow paths of the village, touching everything lightly before moving on. Near the river, the small boat begins to return. It drifts closer to the shore, guided gently by the man inside. The water moves around it in the same calm way, unchanged by the passing hours. He reaches the edge and steps out. The boat settles back into place, tied once more to its post. The net rests inside, slightly damp, carrying the quiet work of the afternoon. There is no need to check it now. That will come later. For now, it is enough that the day's effort has been made. In the village, the return begins. Figures appear along the paths, moving slowly, their shapes softened by the lowering light. The homes, once still in the heat of midday, begin to feel alive again, though never in a loud way. A woman stands near the entrance of her home. She looks toward the path. Soon the others will arrive. She does not call out. She simply waits. Inside, the space has been prepared. A small area cleared. Simple things set in place. The quiet work of evening, done without thought, done because it has always been done. Children move nearby, their steps slower now. The day has taken its time with them as well. Their energy has softened, not gone, but changed into something quieter. One sits near the ground, drawing absent lines in the dust once more. Another watches the path, just as the woman does. The sun lowers further. Now it is closer to the edge of the land, casting a deeper glow across everything. The light turns warmer, richer, spreading across the walls of the homes, across the ground, across the surface of the river. Shadows grow long again. They stretch outward, thin and quiet, reaching across the earth in gentle shapes. The men enter the village, their steps slow as they approach. The work of the day has settled into their bodies, not as something heavy, but as something complete. There is a quiet understanding that this part of the day is finished. One man reaches his home. He steps inside, ducking slightly beneath the low doorway. The change in light is immediate. Inside, it is dimmer, cooler, softer. He sits, not speaking, not needing to. A small clay jar is brought to him. He drinks. The water is warm now, but still welcome. It moves slowly, easing the dryness of the day. Nearby, the preparation of food begins again. Not hurried, not complex, simple actions repeated many times before. The grain that was ground in the morning has become something more now. It is shaped, warmed, shared. The same quiet process unfolds, just as it did at the start of the day. The smell returns, warm, familiar, filling the small spaces of the homes, drifting gently into the evening air. Outside, the sky continues to change. The blue begins to fade. In its place, soft tones of gold and pale orange spread slowly, blending into one another without clear lines. The sun rests low now, touching the edge of the world. The Nile reflects it all. The surface holds the colors, stretching them into long, broken patterns that move with the water. The river does not pause to admire the light. It simply carries it along, just as it carries everything else. The village settles into the evening, not with silence, but with a softer kind of sound. Low voices, gentle movements,
the quiet sharing of food, of presence, of the simple ending of a day. Nothing feels rushed, nothing feels unfinished. The day has been lived, and now it slowly begins to rest.
The sun lowers until it can no longer be seen. It does not disappear suddenly. It slips away slowly, leaving behind a soft glow that lingers along the edge of the land. The warmth of its light fades gently, and the colors in the sky begin to change once more. Gold becomes pale, pale becomes gray, and then, slowly, the first hints of blue return, deeper than before, stretching wider as the evening settles in. The village moves quietly within this change. There is no clear moment when day becomes night. It happens gradually, just as everything else does. Outside the homes, small movements continue. A man steps out and looks toward the sky. He does not speak. He simply watches as the light softens, as the shapes of the land begin to blend into one another. The sharp edges of the day become gentler, less defined. Nearby, a faint flame appears. A small clay lamp is lit inside one of the homes. The light it gives is soft and steady, flickering just enough to remind the eye that it is there. It does not push away the darkness. It only sits within it, creating a small space of warmth. More lamps follow, one by one, each home holding its own quiet glow. From a distance, the village now looks different. Small points of light rest close to the ground, like fallen stars scattered gently across the earth. Inside one home, a family gathers. They sit close, not out of necessity, but out of habit. The space is simple, the walls holding the last traces of the day's warmth. The air is calm, carrying the faint scent of cooked grain and earth. Food is shared, not in large portions, not with noise. Each piece is taken slowly, eaten without hurry. Hands move carefully, passing, breaking, offering. The rhythm of eating is quiet, steady, familiar. A child leans slightly against an older figure. Their eyes are heavy now. The day has stretched long, and sleep begins to come gently, not forced, but welcomed. Outside, the sky deepens. The last light fades completely, leaving behind a wide, open darkness. It is not empty, it is filled with quiet. Then, slowly, the stars begin to return. At first, only a few, small, faint points of light appearing one by one. Then more and more, until the sky is once again filled with them, just as it was before the day began. They shine steadily. They do not flicker with urgency. They simply remain. The Nile reflects them. Its surface, now darker again, carries faint, broken images of the stars above. The water continues its endless movement, unchanged by the passing of light or shadow. Near the river, the air feels cooler. A gentle breeze moves across the surface, carrying a softness that was not present during the day. It touches the land lightly, moving through the reeds, brushing against the edges of the village. The sounds of the day fade. There are no tools now, no steady work, only the small, quiet sounds that belong to the night. A distant call of a bird, the faint movement of something unseen in the grass, the soft shifting of water against the shore. Inside the homes, the lamps burn low. Their light grows softer as the oil within them fades slowly. Shadows move gently along the walls, shaped by the small flames, never still, never sharp. One by one, people begin to lie down. Mats are unrolled. Bodies settle close to the ground once more. There is no long preparation for sleep. It comes naturally.
A man rests on his side, his breathing already slowing. A woman adjusts a small covering, then lowers herself beside it. A child curls slightly, their hand resting against the warm surface of the mat. The lamp flickers, then dims, then goes out. Darkness fills the space, but it is not heavy. It is soft, comforting, familiar. Outside, the village grows still. The small lights disappear one by one, until only the sky remains bright, filled with its quiet stars. The Nile continues to flow, unseen now, but always present, always moving, always carrying the slow rhythm of life forward. The land rests, the homes rest, the people rest, and time moves on, gently, without pause, without sound, carrying the night forward into the promise of another morning.
The night deepens slowly. It does not fall all at once, but settles layer by layer, growing quieter, softer, more complete. The last traces of evening have faded, and now the darkness rests fully over the land. The village is still. There are no footsteps along the paths, no voices drifting between the homes. The doors remain closed, the spaces inside filled with the steady rhythm of sleep. Breathing, slow and even, rising and falling in a quiet pattern that matches the calm of the night itself. The air feels cooler now, not cold, but gentle, carrying away the warmth that had gathered during the day. It moves lightly through the narrow spaces between the homes, brushing against the walls, slipping through small openings, touching everything without being seen. Inside one home, a man shifts slightly in his sleep. His movement is small, almost unnoticed. A hand moves, then rests again. His breathing continues, unchanged. Nearby, a child sleeps deeply. Their body remains still, their face relaxed, untouched by the passing hours. Sleep holds them fully, wrapping them in a quiet that is complete and undisturbed. The clay walls around them stand firm. They hold the night within them just as they held the day. They do not change, they do not move, they simply remain, steady and patient. Outside, the sky stretches wide. It feels larger at night, more open, more endless. The stars fill it completely now, scattered across the darkness in quiet patterns that have remained the same for countless nights before. They do not hurry. They do not shift in any way that can be easily seen. They simply exist. The Nile continues beneath them. Its surface is darker now, almost blending into the land around it. Only the faintest reflections of the stars reveal its presence, small broken lights drifting along with the current. The sound of the water is soft, barely there, but constant. It is a sound that never leaves this place. Near the edge of the village, a figure remains awake. Not everyone sleeps at once. Some sit quietly, watching, listening, allowing the night to pass through them without closing their eyes. He sits near the entrance of a home, his back resting against the wall. His gaze moves slowly across the land, not searching for anything in particular, only observing. The darkness does not trouble him. It is familiar. It has always been this way. He listens to the small sounds that remain, the distant movement of water, the faint rustle of reeds, the quiet presence of the world continuing in its own hidden ways. Time passes. It is difficult to measure here. There are no clear markers, no sharp changes, only the slow movement of the stars across the sky, so gradual that it can only be noticed by those who watch for a long time. The man shifts slightly. He adjusts his position, then becomes still again. His breathing remains steady. He is not restless, only awake.
Not far from the village, the land stretches outward, open and quiet. There are no walls here, no boundaries that can be seen in the dark. The earth extends into the distance, fading into shadow, blending with the horizon. Somewhere beyond, other villages rest in the same way. Other homes, other families, all held within the same wide night. Closer to the river, the reeds move gently. A small animal passes through them, careful and quiet. Its presence is brief, leaving only a faint disturbance that disappears almost as soon as it begins. The water continues its endless path. It carries with it small pieces of the world, bits of plant, grains of soil, reflections of the sky. It does not hold on to anything for long. Everything moves forward. Everything continues. In the distance, a structure rises slightly above the land. It is not part of the small village. It stands apart, still and silent. Even in the darkness, its shape can be felt. A place built with care, with intention, meant to last. There is no movement there now, no light, only the presence of something that belongs to both the day and the night, existing beyond the rhythm of a single household or a single moment. Back in the village, the man who remained awake finally lowers his head. Not all at once, slowly. His eyes close. His breathing deepens. The quiet of sleep begins to take him as well. The village becomes fully still. No one remains awake. The homes hold their silence. The air moves gently, carrying nothing but the soft presence of night. Above, the stars continue their slow journey, across the sky, across time, unchanged. The Nile flows, the land rests, and the night carries everything forward, gently, steadily, without sound.
The night does not stay still forever. Even when everything feels paused, even when the world seems to be resting completely, something quiet is always changing in the background. Slowly, without notice, without sound. The darkness over the land begins to soften, just slightly, almost imperceptibly at first. It is not a sudden change. It is more like a deep breath that the world itself is taking, long and steady. The village remains asleep. Inside the homes, people continue to rest in calm, steady silence. Their bodies are still, their breathing even. The warmth of sleep holds them gently, as it has through the deeper hours of the night. Outside, the air feels different now. Not colder, not warmer, just lighter. The stars are still present, but something around them begins to shift. The darkness that once felt complete now carries the faintest hint of space, as if the sky is preparing itself for something new. Far away along the edge of the horizon, a barely visible line begins to form. It is not color yet, not light yet, only the suggestion of change, a softness that did not exist before. The Nile reflects nothing of this yet. It continues in its steady path, moving as it always has, unaffected by the quiet transformation above it. The water flows with the same patience it carried through the day, through the evening, through the night. Time passes without urgency. A small bird stirs somewhere near the reeds. Not a full movement into wakefulness, just a brief shift, a quiet awareness that does not yet become action. Then stillness again. The village remains unchanged, but the sky continues its slow transition. The faint line at the horizon grows a little clearer. It begins to carry the softest trace of pale gray, blending gently into the remaining darkness. Night is not gone, but it is loosening its hold. Inside one of the homes, a man's breathing changes slightly. Not waking,
Not yet, but the rhythm of sleep begins to shift, moving closer to the surface of awareness. His body senses the change in the world outside before his mind does. Still, he remains asleep. The earth beneath the village is quiet, warm from the previous day, slowly releasing that warmth into the coolness of the approaching morning. The clay walls of the homes hold steady, keeping the inside world soft and enclosed. A new breath of wind moves across the land. It is gentle, almost fragile. It passes through the reeds, across the river, through the narrow paths of the village, touching everything lightly before fading again. The sky changes further. The gray at the horizon begins to lift, becoming faintly brighter. Not enough to wake the world, but enough to signal that the darkness is not endless. The stars begin to feel slightly less sharp, still visible, still present, but now they seem farther away, as if the sky itself is widening. In the quiet fields beyond the village, everything remains still. The soil waits. The tools rest where they were left. There is no movement here yet, only the anticipation of it. Inside the homes, sleep continues. A child shifts slightly, curling closer into warmth. An older figure exhales slowly, steady and calm. The village is still one body of rest, but the edge of that rest is beginning to loosen. The horizon brightens again. Now a faint glow appears, pale and soft, spreading gently along the line where earth and sky meet. It is not strong enough to define shapes, but it is enough to change how the world feels. Night is no longer deep. It is becoming thin. And in that thinning, the first sense of morning begins to exist. The Nile reflects this faint change now. A very slight shimmer appears on its surface, not yet gold, not yet blue, but something in between, a quiet in-between light that belongs only to this moment. Inside the village, the first true signs of waking have not yet come, but they are close, so close that the world seems to hold itself in a pause, waiting, the breath before movement, the silence before sound, the stillness before the day begins again. And as the horizon grows a little brighter, the night continues to fade, gently, slowly, without resistance, making space for another morning, just as it always has, just as it always will. The first light does not arrive quickly. It comes in pieces, soft and slow, as if the world is being gently uncovered rather than changed. The horizon, once only a faint suggestion of gray, now begins to carry a pale glow. It spreads carefully, without urgency, touching the edge of the land and the edge of the sky at the same time. The village is still asleep, for now. Inside the homes, the darkness is not complete anymore. It is becoming thinner, less dense. The shapes of walls, mats, and resting bodies begin to exist more clearly, not because anything inside has changed, but because the light outside is slowly returning. A child breathes deeply in sleep, steady, unaware. Nearby, an adult turns slightly, adjusting to the subtle change in temperature that comes with the approaching morning. The air inside the home feels just a little different now, less cool than the deepest night, gently shifting toward warmth. Outside, the Nile begins to show the first hint of reflection. Not color yet, only a soft brightness forming on its surface, stretching along the water in a long, quiet line. The river does not change its pace. It continues as it always has, carrying the same steady movement through the quiet hours. The sky grows brighter, very slowly. The darkness does not disappear. It recedes, like something stepping back rather than being removed. In its place, a soft gray-blue spreads across the upper sky, deepening gradually as it expands. The stars begin to fade, one by one, without sound, not vanishing all at once, but gently becoming less visible, as if they are retreating into the background of the morning. A bird moves again near the reeds. This time it does not settle back into stillness. It stays. It shifts its weight, then remains alert, as if acknowledging that the world around it is changing. Inside the village, the first signs of waking begin. Not sudden, not loud, a slow unfolding. A man opens his eyes. He does not rise immediately. He lies still for a moment, feeling the difference in the air. The coolness of night is still present, but it is no longer complete. There is something else now, a softness that signals the coming day. He sits up slowly. The movement is unhurried. The mat beneath him creases quietly. He does not speak. There is no need. Nearby, others begin to stir in the same gentle way, as if the entire village is gradually remembering itself. Outside, the sky continues to brighten. The gray now shifts into a faint, warm tone, not yet the gold of full morning, but something lighter, something that carries the promise of it. The horizon glows more clearly now, a thin line of light, steady and growing. The Nile responds subtly. Its surface begins to shimmer more visibly, catching the new light and stretching it across small ripples that move without hurry. The water reflects the changing sky in fragments, never still, never fixed. In one home, a woman reaches for a clay jar. She moves carefully, her actions still quiet, still close to the rhythm of sleep. She drinks slowly, letting the water settle into wakefulness. The village is not fully awake yet, but it is no longer fully asleep. It exists between two states, a quiet threshold, a moment of transition that feels almost suspended, as if the world is holding its breath before the day fully begins. Outside, the light strengthens again. Now the outlines of objects begin to appear more clearly. Walls, trees, paths, the gentle curves of the riverbank. Shapes return to the world. The stars are nearly gone. Only a few remain, faint and distant, barely holding on to the sky. A soft wind moves across the land. It is cooler than the day will be, but no longer cold like the night. It passes through the village gently, touching skin, moving through open spaces, brushing against the surface of the river. And then, the first full hint of sunrise begins. Not yet the sun itself, but the beginning of its presence, a widening glow at the edge of the horizon, spreading upward in slow motion, filling the sky with a growing sense of arrival. Inside the village, more people are now awake. Not all, but many. The rhythm of the day is preparing to begin again. Hands will soon move. Water will be drawn. Bread will be prepared. Fields will be approached. But for this brief moment, everything is still in transition. The night has not fully left, and the day has not fully arrived. It is a quiet space in between. And as the light continues to grow, the world waits gently for the sun to rise once more over the Nile, beginning another slow and familiar day in the long, steady life of ancient Egypt.
The sun finally begins to appear. Not all at once, not in a sharp moment, but slowly, as if it is rising through layers of silence. At first, it is only a brightening at the edge of the horizon, a soft swelling of light that pushes against the remaining darkness. Then, gradually, a curved edge of golden glow becomes visible, resting low over the land. The village is now fully awake, not hurried, not loud, just awake. Inside the homes, people begin to move with the gentle rhythm of morning. Bodies rise from mats,
Hands reach for simple things placed nearby. The air inside each home feels cooler than it will soon become, carrying the last quiet breath of night. A man steps outside. He pauses at the doorway. The light touches his face softly, not yet strong, still gentle enough to feel almost like warmth rather than brightness. He blinks slowly, adjusting to the return of day. Around him, the village is already forming its familiar shape again. Smoke rises faintly from small fires being lit. Doors open. Footsteps return to the paths. The sound of morning begins, not sudden, but layered, like many quiet movements joining together. The Nile reflects the sunrise now. Its surface turns into a slow blend of gold and pale orange, shifting with every small ripple. The water carries the light in broken pieces, never holding it still, always moving it forward. Near the riverbank, a woman fills her jar again. This action feels familiar. Repetition gives it ease. She kneels, lowers the jar, lets it fill, lifts it carefully. The weight of the water is steady in her hands as she stands again. She does not rush. Nothing here requires rushing. In the fields, the men begin to gather once more. They walk along the same paths as before, the same roots pressed into the earth by countless footsteps over time. The soil is still cool beneath the growing light, holding the memory of the night. Tools are picked up again, not with urgency, but with acceptance. The day has returned, and so the work returns with it. A breeze moves across the land again, slightly warmer now. It passes through the reeds, over the river, through the village paths. It carries with it the scent of water and earth and smoke from early fires. The sun rises higher. The golden light spreads further across everything, reaching deeper into the village, touching walls, roofs, and open spaces. Shadows shorten again, becoming small and close to the ground. Inside one home, bread is prepared once more. The same simple process as before: grain, water, hands, heat. The repetition does not feel repetitive to those living it. It feels natural, like breathing. Each step follows the next without thought, guided by memory rather than instruction. The smell begins to spread again, warm, familiar, filling the morning air. A child steps outside and looks toward the river. The brightness is stronger now, but still comfortable. The world feels fully present again, fully visible. Every shape, every movement, every sound belongs to the returning day. In the distance, the fields wait. They are unchanged from yesterday, yet always ready to become active again. The soil rests under the rising sun, preparing itself for the same quiet cycle of work. The men arrive slowly, one by one. No greeting is necessary. They take their places. The tools meet the earth again, and the steady rhythm of labor begins once more. The Nile flows beside them, unchanged, carrying its endless movement forward as it has always done. And above it all, the sun continues to rise, filling the sky with full daylight now, completing the return of morning. The village is alive again, not in excitement, not in noise, but in the calm repetition of life continuing as it always has. A new day, the same rhythm, the same gentle order, and everything moves forward, quietly, steadily, without pause. The morning settles fully over the land now, not as a sudden change, but as a slow completion of everything that was already beginning. The sun is higher, and its light spreads wide across the Nile Valley, touching everything with a steady, even glow. There is no harshness in it yet, only the quiet certainty of a new day continuing forward as it always has. The village is fully awake, but even in wakefulness there is calm. Nothing feels rushed, nothing feels chaotic. Every movement seems to belong to a pattern that has been repeated so many times that it no longer needs to be thought about. Inside the homes, daily life continues in its familiar rhythm. Clay jars are lifted and set down with care. Water is poured slowly into small containers. Bread is broken into pieces that are not large, not small, just enough to begin the day. Hands move with quiet familiarity, as if they are following memory rather than making decisions. A woman sits near the doorway of her home. The sunlight reaches her feet first, then slowly climbs upward as the day continues. She adjusts the edge of her clothing slightly, not out of discomfort, but out of habit. Her gaze moves toward the path outside, where the village is already becoming active again. There is no single center of activity here. Everything happens at once, but gently spread out, like ripples moving across still water. Near the river, more people gather. The Nile is wider in feeling now that the light is strong. It appears more open, more present, its surface constantly shifting with small, soft movements. The reflection of the sky stretches across it, broken into pieces that never stay still. Men prepare boats again. The wooden edges creak softly as weight is added, as ropes are adjusted, as nets are checked once more. These actions are not done quickly. They are done carefully, because care has been practiced for generations. A man steps into a boat and pauses. He feels the gentle movement beneath his feet as the water supports the structure. Then he adjusts his stance and lowers himself into position, steady and calm, as if the river itself is something familiar and trusted. With a small push, the boat moves. Not far, not fast, just enough to leave the shore and enter the slow, open movement of the Nile. In the fields, the work continues under the growing sun. The soil, already turned from earlier, now receives further shaping. Lines deepen, patterns extend. The land slowly transforms under repeated motion, not into something new, but into something prepared. The men move in steady cycles. Lift, press, turn, step, repeat. Each action is simple, but together they form the structure of survival, the quiet foundation of everything that will come later. The sun continues its climb. Now the warmth is more noticeable. It rests on the skin, on the ground, on the tops of the fields. Shadows shrink further, gathering close beneath objects and people, no longer stretching far as they did in the early morning. A faint breeze moves through the village. It passes between homes, carrying the scent of earth, smoke from cooking fires, and the distant freshness of the river. It does not linger. It simply moves through and disappears. Children move through the paths again. Their presence is lighter than the adults, less bound by work, more open to wandering. One follows another for a while, then stops to look at something small on the ground, a piece of clay, a stick, a mark left by someone else earlier in the morning. Nothing is important in a formal way, but everything holds attention for a moment before being left behind. In one shaded corner, an older figure sits quietly. They do not work in the same way anymore. Instead, they observe. The repetition of life is visible from here in a different way, not as effort, but as pattern. The returning movements of people, the steady return of boats, the constant rhythm of the fields, the slow breathing of the village itself. Everything continues, not because it is forced, but because it is known. Time moves forward gently. The river continues its endless path, and the village remains inside its rhythm, carried by the same quiet structure that has held it for as long as anyone can remember. The day is still young, but already it feels familiar, as if it has always been this way, and as if it will continue in exactly the same gentle way for a very long time. The day continues its slow unfolding, not changing in any dramatic way, but deepening instead, like a quiet color spreading through cloth. The sun is higher now, steady and patient above the land. Its light has settled into the world, no longer feeling new, but fully present. Everything it touches becomes clearer, more defined, more real in a simple and ordinary way. The village remains in motion, not in bursts, not in urgency, but in a continuous, steady flow that feels almost like breathing. In the homes, the morning work blends into the rest of the day without a clear separation. There is no sharp moment where one activity ends and another begins. Instead, tasks move into each other gently. A pot is placed near the fire. Water inside it warms slowly. Hands adjust its position without much thought. Nearby, grain is measured again, not in precise numbers, but in familiar portions remembered by practice. The texture of it is dry and fine, slipping slightly between fingers before being gathered again. The sound of grinding stone becomes more noticeable, a soft, repetitive rhythm, stone against stone, grain becoming flour. The motion is small, but it repeats for long periods, and in its repetition, it becomes part of the village's background sound, like wind or distant water. Outside, the paths are more defined now under full daylight. Footsteps have already passed over them many times since morning. The earth is slightly compacted in places, softer in others, shaped by constant use rather than design. People move along these paths without hesitation. Each direction feels known. Each turn feels remembered. At the river, the Nile continues its slow, uninterrupted movement. It does not change for the village, and yet the village depends on it completely. Small boats move along its surface, spaced apart, each one following its own gentle route. The water supports them without resistance, as if it understands their purpose. Inside one of the boats, a man sits quietly while the river carries him forward. His hands rest near the edge, occasionally adjusting a rope or checking a net. His movements are minimal, done only when needed. Between these small actions, he simply observes the water passing by. The surface is never the same from one moment to the next. It shifts constantly. Light breaks across it in thin lines, then reforms, then disappears again as the boat moves. Along the banks, reeds bend slightly with the breeze. They do not move much, but they are never completely still. Their motion is subtle, almost like a slow conversation with the wind. In the fields, work continues under the stronger sunlight. The soil is warmer now, but still workable. Tools press into it again and again, shaping it into lines that will guide future growth. The labor is steady, but not harsh. It is part of the expected rhythm of the day. Men stand at regular distances from each other, not needing instruction. Each knows where to be. Each knows what comes next. The silence between them is not emptiness, it is familiarity, a quiet understanding that does not require words. Farther back in the village, more detailed work takes place in shaded areas. Hands shape clay into simple forms, containers, bowls, small storage vessels. The clay is cool at first, then gradually warms under touch. It yields easily, responding to pressure without resistance. Water is used sparingly to smooth surfaces. Edges are refined slowly. Imperfections are pressed away with patient movements. These objects are not rushed. They are made as part of daily continuity, meant for use, meant for holding water, grain, life itself. Nearby, someone checks a woven mat. The fibers are tight, repeating in careful patterns. The surface is even, though not perfect. Small variations remain, reminders of human hands shaping material over time. The sun continues its steady path overhead. Light shifts slightly as the angle changes, but the feeling of the day remains the same, calm, consistent, predictable in a way that brings quiet comfort. A brief pause passes through the village, not as inactivity, but as a softer moment between tasks. People sit for a short time in shade. They drink water slowly. They rest without speaking much. And then, almost naturally, they return to movement again. The rhythm never fully stops. It only changes shape. The river flows. The fields continue. The homes remain active. And the village moves through the middle of the day in its familiar, quiet pattern, held together not by urgency, but by repetition that stretches back through countless mornings just like this one.
As the day moves forward, the light begins to change again, not in color, but in weight. The sun is now high above the land, and its presence feels more direct. It rests over everything evenly, covering the village, the fields, and the river in a steady brightness that does not shift much from moment to moment. Time feels slower in this part of the day, not because anything has stopped, but because everything has settled into its middle rhythm. The village continues its work, yet the energy has softened slightly, as if the world itself is resting while still moving. In the homes, the heat begins to gather gently inside clay walls. These walls hold warmth well, slowly absorbing the sun's presence. Inside, the air feels still, but not heavy, just quiet and warm in a familiar way. People adjust their movements without thinking much about it. Work shifts closer to shade. Tasks that were done in open light during the morning are now brought inward or under covering. A woven mat is moved slightly to a cooler corner. A pot is lifted and placed away from direct sun. Small adjustments, repeated throughout the village, help shape the comfort of the day. Outside, the paths feel brighter now, almost pale under the strong light. Dust is softer underfoot, not rising much, but resting on the surface like a thin layer that has settled over time. Footsteps continue, but fewer than in the morning rush. The pace of movement slows, still steady, still ongoing, but less frequent, more spaced out. At the river, the Nile carries on without change. It does not respond to heat or light in the way people do. It continues its endless movement, indifferent to the hour, reflecting the sky in a softer, more diluted way now that the sun is high. Boats still travel, but their movement feels quieter, less busy, more deliberate. A man sits in the shade of a small canopy on the boat, resting his hands while watching the water pass. The sound of movement is minimal, the gentle contact of wood and water, the occasional shift of rope, the faint ripple breaking against the hull. Everything feels stretched out in time. Near the banks, reeds stand stiller than earlier, their motion reduced to the smallest sway when the wind passes through. Even the wind feels slower now, warmer, less refreshing than it was in the early morning. In the fields, labor continues, but the rhythm has changed. Movements are still repeated, lift, press, shape, but more slowly now, with longer pauses between actions. Men stand in partial shade when possible, adjusting their positions to avoid the strongest light. The soil is still worked, still shaped, but the intensity has softened. Sweat gathers and fades. Breathing becomes slower. Hands pause more often before continuing. Yet the work does not stop. It simply adapts.
farther from the fields, under shaded areas near homes and small structures, life becomes quieter. People gather in small groups or sit alone, not for conversation, not for activity, but for rest within the middle of the day. Water is sipped slowly. Bread is eaten in small pieces. Silence fills the spaces between brief movements. A child lies on the ground in shade, not fully asleep, but in a calm stillness that sits between waking and dreaming. An older figure sits nearby, watching without speaking, their presence steady and unmoving. The village feels slightly suspended in this part of the day, not paused, not active in the earlier sense, but continuing in a softer form. Even sounds are reduced. The grinding of grain is less frequent. Footsteps are fewer. Voices are quieter when they appear at all. And yet everything still exists in motion beneath the surface of stillness. The sun remains steady overhead, and its presence holds the day in place. Nothing is rushed forward. Nothing is pulled back. Everything simply continues in its slow, balanced rhythm. And in this quiet middle of the day, the village exists in a calm state of endurance, carried forward gently by time that does not hurry, and by life that does not stop.
The afternoon slowly begins to change, though the change is so subtle that it is almost only felt, not seen. The sun is still strong, still high, still covering everything in steady light, but something in the air starts to soften. The heat that felt sharp at midday begins to ease slightly, becoming more familiar, more manageable, as if the land is gently adjusting itself again. The village notices this without needing to speak about it. There is no announcement of change, only a quiet return of movement. In the shaded corners of homes and small work areas, people begin to shift their positions again. Resting bodies sit up more often. Hands that were still begin to move. The long stillness of the middle day slowly loosens its hold. Life does not restart. It simply becomes more active again. A pot is stirred once more over a small fire that has been kept low throughout the heat of the day. The sound of it is gentle, liquid moving slowly inside clay, a soft reminder that warmth and food continue without interruption. Outside, the paths that had grown quieter earlier begin to show more movement again. Footsteps return gradually, at first only a few, then more, then a steady stream that feels familiar once again. The village is not waking because it never truly slept. It is simply returning to a fuller rhythm. At the river, the Nile continues its endless flow, unchanged, but the activity along its banks begins to increase. Boats that were resting or moving slowly earlier now drift with more purpose again. Ropes are adjusted, cargo is checked. Hands return to familiar tasks with a quiet sense of direction. A man standing at the edge of a boat pushes gently against the shore, and the vessel responds immediately, sliding forward into the water with a slow, controlled movement. The surface ripples outward in soft circles before settling again into its constant motion. The river carries everything forward, as it always does, without preference or pause. Along the banks, more people appear again as the heat begins to feel less heavy. The breeze, though still warm, carries a slight freshness compared to midday. It moves through reeds and across open spaces, touching skin and fabric lightly. In the fields, work resumes with a steadier energy. The earlier slow rhythm becomes a bit more consistent again. Movements are still careful, still practiced, but now there is less need for long pauses. The body adjusts to the returning comfort of the afternoon. Tools press into soil once more. Lines are extended. Work areas are continued from where they were left earlier.
There is a sense of completion returning to tasks that were paused during the height of the sun. Farther back in the village, craft work becomes more active again as well. Clay that was shaped earlier in the day is checked and adjusted. Some pieces are left to dry in shaded areas where air moves gently around them. Others are refined further, their surfaces smoothed with slow, careful hands. The sound of weaving returns in small corners. Soft repetition, thread moving through thread. Patterns continuing without rush, but with renewed attention. Children move more freely again as well. The earlier stillness of midday has passed, and their energy returns in soft waves. They walk between shaded areas and open paths, sometimes stopping, sometimes continuing without clear direction, always staying within the familiar boundaries of the village. The light of the sun begins to change again. Not yet low, but no longer directly overhead. It starts to angle slightly, stretching shadows just a little farther than before. Objects begin to gain shape again through contrast, not just brightness. The village feels more dimensional once more. The world regains depth as the afternoon moves forward. People begin to think quietly and without urgency about the coming evening, not in planning, not in concern, but in awareness. Work will slow again. Fires will grow. Homes will become the center of attention once more. The river will reflect a different light, and the day, still ongoing, will begin its slow descent toward rest. But for now, everything remains in motion, soft, steady, familiar. The afternoon continues to unfold across the Nile Valley, carrying the village forward in its endless, repeating rhythm of life.
The afternoon slowly leans toward evening, not in a sudden shift, but in a gradual softening that spreads across the entire land. The sunlight, once strong and direct, begins to angle more gently now. It no longer presses down from above in the same way. Instead, it stretches outward, longer and lower, giving the world a different kind of shape. Shadows begin to return. At first, they are small and faint. Then they grow slowly as the sun lowers step by step toward the horizon. The village feels this change without needing to observe it closely. It is something known by habit, by generations of experience, by the body's memory of light and time. Work in the fields continues, but the rhythm has shifted once again. The intensity of midday is gone. What remains is a steadier, quieter persistence. Movements are still repeated, still purposeful, but now they carry the feeling of nearing completion. Tools press into the earth with less resistance than earlier. The soil, warmed throughout the day, now holds a different texture, softer in places, slightly firmer in others where the sun has dried it more deeply. Men stand in lines that feel more relaxed than before, not rushed, not strained, just continuing. A few glances are given toward the west, almost unconsciously, where the light is slowly beginning to change. At the river, the Nile reflects this shift in its own quiet way. The surface, which earlier carried strong, bright reflections, now begins to soften in tone. The water still moves endlessly, but the colors it holds become warmer, less sharp, more blended. Boats that had been moving steadily now begin to drift toward their final paths for the day. Ropes are pulled in slowly, cargo is secured, hands move with the familiarity of ending routines rather than beginning ones. A man sits near the edge of a boat, letting the motion of the water guide the final stretch of his journey. He does not look hurried. His posture is calm, slightly relaxed, as if the river itself is carrying him gently toward rest. Along the banks, the wind becomes slightly cooler, not cold, just less heavy than it was during midday. It passes over the reeds and across the open land with a softer touch, carrying with it the faint scent of water mixed with earth that has been warmed all day. Back in the village, activity begins to gather again in a different way, not toward labor, but toward home. People return from fields and river paths slowly, in small groups or alone. The movement is unhurried but steady, like a flow returning to its source. Paths that were once busy earlier in the day now feel full again, but with a different energy, less about beginning and more about returning. Inside homes, small preparations for evening begin. Fires are adjusted, clay pots are set back into place. Water is brought in small amounts, not for work, but for the quiet needs of closing the day. Food preparation becomes more noticeable again, not in urgency, but in comfort. The smell of simple meals begins to rise gently into the cooling air. Bread, grains, small cooked portions, nothing elaborate, nothing excessive, just the steady continuation of daily nourishment. Children return closer to home areas. Their movement slows compared to earlier in the day. Some sit near doorways watching the changing light. Others stay close to adults, following familiar routines without needing instruction. The sun lowers further. Now the light begins to take on a warmer tone. Not bright white, not harsh gold, but something softer, almost amber, spreading across the landscape. The fields begin to lose their sharp detail and become more blended in tone. The river reflects longer streaks of light stretched across its surface like slow-moving lines. Everything feels slightly elongated in this hour. Time itself seems to stretch gently, as if preparing to settle. The village, still active, now carries a quieter energy. Tasks are not ending abruptly. They are easing down, one by one, naturally, as if the entire day has always been moving toward this slow descent. And in this gentle approach toward evening, the rhythm of life remains steady and unchanged, only softer now, like a song lowering its volume rather than stopping. The land waits for sunset, and the village continues its calm return toward home, toward firelight, toward rest that will soon arrive with the fading sun.
The sun now moves closer to the edge of the world, though it does so without hurry. It lowers slowly, as if it is carefully placing itself down beyond the horizon rather than disappearing. The sky begins to change in color, not all at once, but in soft layers that blend into one another without clear boundaries. Warm tones spread across the west, soft gold, muted orange, a gentle fading light that stretches across the Nile Valley and settles over the village like a quiet blanket. Work in the fields has mostly come to an end now, not suddenly, but gradually, through a natural easing of movement. Tools are set down, hands rest, bodies straighten after long hours of bending and pressing into the earth. There is no sense of finality, only completion. The work of the day has been done, and the land remains behind them, unchanged in its presence, waiting for the same return tomorrow. People begin to walk back toward the village in slow groups. Their silhouettes stretch longer now as the sun lowers behind them. Each step feels lighter, not because of excitement, but because of release. The effort of the day is fading into memory. At the river, the Nile becomes especially quiet in appearance, even though it never stops moving. The surface now holds the colors of the evening sky more deeply. The water reflects the soft orange and fading gold in long, broken ribbons that shift with every gentle ripple. Boats return toward shore. Their movement is unhurried, controlled,
familiar. A man pulls a rope slowly, guiding his boat into place near the bank. The wood meets the shore with a soft sound, barely noticeable under the wider quiet of the evening. Another adjusts a net one final time before folding it away for the night. Everything here is closing, but gently, like a door being left slightly open to let the air pass through. Back in the village, the atmosphere begins to shift again. The heat of the day fades, replaced by the softer coolness of evening air. It moves through the paths, through the spaces between homes, through the open doorways where light now begins to gather differently. Fires are lit more clearly now, not the large working fires of the day, but smaller, steadier ones meant for cooking and warmth. Flames appear in scattered places throughout the village, glowing softly against the growing dimness. Their light is small but comforting. Inside homes, evening preparation becomes the center of activity. Food is cooked slowly over low flames. The sounds are gentle, pots being placed down, water poured, grains stirred. Each action feels more relaxed than earlier in the day, as if the body is finally releasing the tension it carried through hours of work. The smell of cooked food begins to fill the air more fully now, warm, simple, familiar. Children gather closer to home spaces. Their energy is quieter now, no longer scattered through paths and open areas. They sit or lie near adults, watching the movement of firelight or the changing colors outside as daylight continues to fade. The sun touches the horizon now, just the edge of it remaining visible. The sky around it deepens into richer colors, soft reds, fading golds, and gentle purples beginning to form higher up. The land becomes more silhouette than detail. Shapes of trees, homes, and distant fields stand against the sky in quiet outlines. And then, slowly, the sun begins to disappear, not abruptly, but in a slow lowering that feels almost like a pause in time. As it sinks, the village becomes more dependent on its small lights, fires, lamps, glowing embers that begin to define the spaces between homes. The river holds on to the last of the daylight a little longer, reflecting the fading glow in a final stretch of brightness before it too begins to darken. Evening arrives fully, not as a moment, but as a soft settling across everything. The day does not end with noise or change. It ends with quiet. And in that quiet, the village continues its final movements, returning, resting, gathering, and preparing for night in the same steady rhythm that has guided every hour before it.
Night arrives in a slow and quiet way over the land of ancient Egypt. It does not feel like a sharp ending to the day. It feels more like a gentle closing of something that has been open for a long time. The last light of the sun fades fully beyond the horizon, leaving behind a sky that is no longer bright, but not yet completely dark. There is a soft in-between moment where the world seems to pause, a moment where shapes are still visible, but colors are beginning to disappear. Across the land of Egypt, the evening settles like a calm breath being released. The village, which has been active since early morning, now moves into its quietest rhythm. Fires that were small before now become the main source of light. Their glow is warm and steady, flickering gently against the walls of homes made from clay and reed. Inside these homes, the outside world becomes distant. The sounds of the day fade away, replaced by softer, closer sounds. A pot being set down carefully, a piece of bread being broken slowly,
a quiet exchange of words spoken in low voices. There is no rush left in the air, only the calm continuation of evening life. Outside, the river remains present even in darkness. The great flow of the Nile River moves steadily, though now it is harder to see. Only faint reflections of firelight and the last traces of sky remain on its surface. It continues its path without change, as it always has, even when the world around it becomes still. Along its banks, the silhouettes of reeds and small boats rest quietly. Nothing here feels abandoned. Everything feels paused, waiting for tomorrow without worry. Inside the village, families gather closer together. The fire becomes the center of attention. Its light moves gently across faces, walls, and objects, creating shifting shadows that rise and fall with each small movement of flame. Children sit near adults, their energy finally softened by the long day. There is no noise of labor now, only the quiet presence of being together. Sometimes someone speaks softly, a memory of the day, a simple thought, a short exchange that does not need to continue for long. And then silence returns again, comfortable and familiar. This is the time when the stories of the day begin to settle in the mind, not spoken loudly, but carried in reflection. The fields, the river, the work, the heat, the slow movement of hours, all of it now feels distant, even though it happened only earlier today. Outside the homes, the night grows deeper. The sky above becomes darker, layer by layer, until the last traces of color disappear. Stars begin to appear again, one by one, not suddenly, but carefully, as if they are returning after a long absence. The land of Egypt now exists under a wide and quiet sky. The same sky that watched the beginning of the day now watches its end. Inside the village, firelight continues to flicker. It is not strong like the sun. It does not reach far, but it is enough. Enough to cook, enough to see, enough to bring comfort to the small circle of home. As the night deepens, activity slowly becomes even softer. Movements reduce, voices fade further, bodies begin to rest. Some lie down on mats inside homes, while others remain near the last warmth of the fire before sleep takes them gently. The village does not become silent at once. It becomes quiet in stages, like a wave slowly leaving the shore. And in this quiet, the Nile continues its eternal movement. The land rests, the people rest. The day is no longer present. Only its memory remains, carried softly into sleep. And over all of it, the night settles completely, calm and steady, holding the world in a peaceful stillness that feels ancient, familiar, and endlessly repeated.
The night is now fully present. It is no longer arriving, no longer forming. It is simply here, spread across everything in a wide and quiet stillness. In the land of Egypt, darkness settles evenly over the village, over the fields, and over the long, slow path of the river. The stars are clear now, countless small points of light scattered across a sky that feels deeper than it did during the day, as if the world has expanded in silence. There is no movement in the sky that can be seen, yet everything feels alive in a quiet way. Below, the village has entered its deepest calm. Fires are now smaller than before. Some are reduced to glowing embers, their bright flames softened into steady orange light that breathes slowly with the wind. Inside the homes, people are resting. The mats that held bodies through the night are still now, carrying the weight of sleep. Breathing is slow, even, unbroken. The sounds of the day are gone. There is no grinding, no walking, no work,
only the occasional soft shift of fabric or the quiet movement of someone turning in sleep. Outside, the air is cooler now. It moves gently through the village paths, passing over clay walls and reed structures without resistance. The land feels more open in the dark, as if boundaries between fields, homes, and riverbanks are less visible, blending into a single resting space. The great river, the Nile River, continues its motion even now, but it is almost impossible to see directly. Only faint reflections of starlight touch its surface, breaking apart and reforming as the water moves endlessly forward. It does not sleep. It does not pause. It simply continues as it has always done, carrying the life of the land even through its quietest hours. Along the banks, small shapes rest in stillness. Boats pulled close to shore, nets folded and left to dry, tools set aside carefully, ready for the next morning. Everything is in its place. Nothing is forgotten. The village feels complete in its silence. Inside one home, a faint glow remains from a low fire. It is not used for work now, only for warmth and comfort. The light flickers softly against the walls, casting slow-moving shadows that rise and fall like breathing. A figure lies nearby, already deep in sleep, the firelight touching only the edge of their resting form. Time in the night feels different. It is not measured in tasks or movement. It stretches gently, without urgency. Moments blend into one another without clear separation. Outside, the stars continue to shine steadily. The sky above ancient Egypt feels vast in this moment, larger than the village, larger than the river, larger than the land itself. Yet everything beneath it feels held in place, safe in its stillness. As the night deepens further, even the faint sounds become rare. A distant rustle in the reeds, a soft movement of wind, then silence again. The village is now fully asleep, not just resting, but surrendered to the night. And through this silence, life continues in its most quiet form, breathing, waiting, and renewing without awareness. The river flows, the land rests, and the night carries everything forward in its calm, endless passage. Far away, beyond the darkness, the faint suggestion of future morning begins to exist, not as light yet, but as time continuing its slow, patient movement. And the world remains still, wrapped in deep, peaceful night. The deepest part of the night is quiet in a way that feels almost complete. Not empty, but fully settled. In the land of Egypt, everything is resting under a sky filled with steady stars. The darkness is not heavy. It is soft, like a covering that has gently spread over the world and decided to stay. Inside the village, sleep continues without interruption. Bodies remain still on woven mats inside simple clay homes. Breathing is slow and even, carrying the calm rhythm of a long day, finally released. There is no movement that belongs to work now, no sound that belongs to effort, only the faint presence of life continuing quietly beneath rest. Outside, the air cools slightly more than before. It moves through the narrow paths between homes, through open spaces where the ground holds the memory of footsteps from earlier in the day. Everything feels paused but not frozen. The world is simply in its quietest form. Along the river, the Nile River flows without interruption. Even in darkness, it continues its journey, steady and unchanging. Its movement cannot be seen clearly, only felt through faint sounds, soft water against the shore, a gentle shifting that never fully stops. The river does not rest because it does not need to. It carries the memory of the entire land within its movement. Far from the village center, small night sounds appear briefly. A distant call of a bird, a soft rustle in the reeds, a light movement of wind passing over water. Each sound exists for a moment, then disappears again into silence. The land responds to nothing. It simply holds the night. Inside one home, a fire has nearly faded. Only a weak glow remains in the ashes, barely visible, but still present. It gives just enough warmth to keep the space comfortable, but it no longer shapes the room with strong light. Shadows are now mostly still. Even the flickering movement has slowed. Time feels stretched in this part of the night, not moving forward in noticeable steps, just continuing quietly without direction. Outside, the sky remains full of stars. They do not shift in any visible way, yet they feel like they belong to a vast, silent structure above everything. The village beneath them feels small but safe, held within darkness that is not threatening, only constant. As the night slowly moves toward its final hours, there is a subtle change in the air. Not light yet, not sound, just a very gentle sense that the night is no longer at its deepest point. Something distant begins to shift, almost unnoticeable. Animals become slightly more aware in the quiet fields. A bird adjusts its position near the reeds. A faint breeze moves a little more steadily than before. But the village remains asleep, deeply, fully. The land of ancient Egypt continues to rest under the wide sky, while the river moves endlessly through darkness, carrying everything forward without pause. And somewhere far beyond the horizon, time continues its slow approach toward morning once again, though the night still holds everything in its calm and silent embrace.
The night is still present, but it is no longer at its deepest point. There is a very quiet shift in the air, something so subtle it would not be noticed unless one were already listening to silence itself. In the land of Egypt, the darkness remains across the fields and villages, but it feels slightly less heavy than before, not lighter in any visible way, but softer at its edges, as if the world is slowly preparing to change again. Inside the homes, sleep continues. The village is still fully resting. Bodies lie still on mats, wrapped in the quiet warmth of the night. Breathing is steady, unbroken, and calm. There is no sense of urgency anywhere, no disturbance, only the deep continuation of rest that has lasted through many hours. But outside, the world begins to show the earliest signs of transition. Along the river, the Nile River, flows in the same endless path, but the darkness above it is no longer absolute. There is a faint suggestion of change in the sky, not color yet, not light, only a very slight thinning of darkness at the horizon, so subtle that it almost feels imagined. The stars are still visible, still steady, but the sky around them begins to feel less dense, as if space itself is slowly opening again. Near the riverbanks, small movements begin to appear in the natural world. A bird shifts position, remaining still for a moment longer before settling again. Reeds sway gently in a passing breeze that feels slightly cooler than before. The air carries a quiet freshness that belongs to the earliest part of the day, though the sun has not yet returned. Inside the village, nothing has changed yet. People continue to sleep deeply, unaware of the slow transition forming around them. The clay homes remain still, their shapes blending into the darkness. Fireplaces are cold now, or reduced to invisible embers, holding only memory of warmth from earlier hours. Time moves gently through everything, not quickly, not dramatically, just steadily forward. As the final hours of night continue, the first almost imperceptible shift of pre-dawn begins to form. The horizon in the distance shows the faintest difference from the sky above it, a barely noticeable line where darkness is slightly less complete. This is not sunrise yet, it is the quiet preparation for it. The land itself seems to wait without awareness. The fields, resting after a full day of labor, remain still under the night sky. The soil holds its shape, the tools lie where they were left, and everything remains exactly as it was when evening ended. But the feeling of time is changing, slowly, softly, in a way that cannot be measured, only sensed. The river continues its movement unchanged, carrying the night forward as it carries every other hour. And above it all, the sky begins to hold the earliest breath of morning, not visible, not bright, but present in the quiet structure of the world. The village remains asleep, the land remains still, and the night, though still strong, begins to gently loosen its hold, preparing for the return of light once again.
The night is still here, but it no longer feels fully complete. It has entered its final quiet stage, where everything is the same on the surface, yet something deep within the world begins to shift without sound. In the land of Egypt, darkness still covers the villages, the fields, and the long stretching river, but the edges of the sky now feel slightly softer, as if the night is slowly loosening its hold. Inside the homes, people remain asleep. The village is still fully in rest. There is no movement that belongs to waking yet, no voices, no activity, only the steady presence of sleep that has carried through the entire night. But outside, the first true signs of early dawn begin to form. Along the path of the Nile River, the air above the water begins to change in a way that is almost impossible to describe clearly. The darkness is still there, but it is no longer uniform. It is thinning in places, especially near the horizon where the sky meets the land. Not light yet, only the suggestion that light is coming. The stars are still visible, but they feel slightly less sharp than before, as if the sky is beginning to open its eyes slowly. A soft breeze moves across the river's surface. It carries a cooler feeling now, different from the deeper night air. It passes over reeds, touches the still water, and moves quietly toward the sleeping village. In the fields, everything remains still. Tools rest where they were left. The soil holds the memory of yesterday's work. Nothing moves, yet everything feels gently suspended in anticipation of the coming day. Inside one home, a small change occurs. A person shifts slightly in sleep, turning toward a different position, not yet awake, but responding to something subtle in the environment. This kind of movement is rare and soft, not yet part of full waking, but part of the body's awareness of the approaching morning. Elsewhere, a faint sound appears in the distance. A bird, not yet fully active, gives a quiet call that breaks the silence for a moment before fading again. It is not a signal, it is simply part of the transition. The sky now shows a clearer difference at the far edge of the horizon. The darkness there is no longer deep black, but a very faint, muted gray, almost indistinguishable unless one watches carefully. This is the beginning of the return of light, though it still feels far away. The village remains asleep, but the world around it is no longer fully in night. Time continues its slow, steady movement forward. The river flows without interruption, carrying reflections of the fading night sky. And above everything, The transition continues quietly as dawn prepares itself in a way that cannot be rushed, only waited for. The land of ancient Egypt remains calm and still, holding both night and the earliest promise of morning in the same silent breath.
The first real light of morning begins to appear, not as a sudden arrival, but as a slow unfolding that spreads across the horizon like a quiet opening of the sky. In the land of Egypt, the darkness that held the world through the night begins to loosen its shape. It does not disappear all at once. Instead, it thins gently, layer by layer, revealing the first soft colors of dawn beneath it. The village is still mostly asleep, but the world around it is already changing. Along the river, the Nile River reflects this transformation in a very subtle way. The water, once nearly invisible in the dark, now begins to show faint movement of light across its surface. Not bright yet, but noticeable enough to suggest that the sun is preparing to return. The sky at the horizon becomes a soft gray blue, slowly expanding upward. The stars, still present, begin to fade one by one, not in a sudden disappearance, but in a gradual retreat, as if they are stepping backward into distance. Inside the homes, sleep begins to loosen, not fully ending yet, but becoming lighter. A few people shift gently on their mats, their bodies responding to the change in temperature and light even before full awareness returns. The deep stillness of night is slowly giving way to the earliest signs of waking. Outside, the air feels different now, slightly cooler in some places, slightly softer in others. It carries a sense of freshness that belongs only to the edge between night and day. In the fields, the outlines of tools and resting soil become clearer as light increases. What was once shadowed and hidden is now slowly returning to form. The land itself begins to look more defined, as if it is re-emerging from silence. A single bird calls again. This time, another responds. The sound is still gentle, not yet full morning activity, but enough to break the long quiet of the night in small pieces. Inside one home, a person opens their eyes. They do not rise immediately. They lie still for a moment, adjusting to the faint change in light that is beginning to filter into the room. The world outside is no longer fully dark, and this awareness slowly reaches them. Another movement follows in a nearby home, then another. Not a sudden awakening, but a gradual return of consciousness spreading through the village like a quiet wave. The sky continues to brighten. Now the horizon carries a soft glow, pale and warm, stretching slowly upward. The darkness above it still remains, but it is now clearly giving way. The night is ending, and the day is beginning. Outside, the river becomes more visible again. The water now reflects the early light in thin, shifting patterns that move with every gentle current. The Nile continues its endless flow, unchanged, steady, and patient as it has always been. The village begins to stir more clearly now. Fires that were nearly out are gently revived. Small movements appear at doorways. The familiar rhythm of morning preparation begins to return. Water is reached for. Clothing is adjusted. Simple tasks begin again, not in rush, but in quiet acceptance of a new day. The land of ancient Egypt slowly awakens once more, not all at once, but piece by piece, as the light continues to spread across everything with calm and steady patience. And in this moment between night and full morning, the world feels soft, balanced, and quietly renewed. The sun finally rises above the horizon, not in a sudden burst, but in a slow, steady emergence that feels almost gentle in its presence. In the land of Egypt, morning is no longer a distant idea. It is now fully arriving, spreading across the fields,
the homes, and the long, quiet path of the river. The sky changes in layers. Pale gray becomes soft blue. Soft blue warms into a faint gold near the edge of the sun, and slowly light begins to reach every corner of the village again. Shadows return, but now they are shorter, lighter, and clearer. Everything becomes defined once more. Inside the homes, people begin to rise fully from sleep, not in urgency, but in the familiar rhythm of morning that has been repeated for countless days before this one. Mats are folded, clay vessels are reached for, water is taken in slow, simple sips. The quiet of night is replaced by the softer sounds of waking life, footsteps, fabric shifting, low voices beginning to form again. Outside, the village is already transforming. In the land of Nile River, the water now reflects the full arrival of daylight. It moves steadily as always, but now it carries bright lines of gold and pale blue across its surface, broken and reformed with every gentle ripple. Boats near the shore begin to move again. Ropes are untied. Hands guide wooden edges back into the current. The river accepts everything without resistance, as it always has, carrying life forward in its endless, silent path. In the fields, the return of morning work begins, not yet at full intensity, but in preparation. Tools are gathered again. People walk familiar paths between homes and farmland. The soil, cooled slightly from the night, feels different underfoot than it did during the heat of yesterday. There is a freshness in the air that belongs only to early morning, a softness that slowly fades as the sun rises higher. Inside the village, fires are lit again, this time more intentionally. Small flames appear in different corners of the settlement, used for cooking, warmth, and the start of daily routines. The smell of simple food begins to rise once more, bread, grain, and water warmed over clay pots. It is not a new smell, it is the same smell as every morning before it, and that is what makes it feel steady and familiar. Children move into the open spaces again. Their presence returns with the light, slower at first, then gradually more active as the day becomes real again. Some follow adults, some sit near doorways, some simply watch the movement of the village as it rebuilds its daily rhythm. The sun climbs higher now. The light becomes stronger, more direct. Colors in the world become clearer. The river brightens. The fields sharpen in detail. The village becomes fully awake. Everything that was paused during the night has now returned to motion. But nothing feels rushed. Everything feels known. The same movements, the same paths, the same gentle cycle of life repeating again. And as the morning fully settles over the land of ancient Egypt, the day begins once more, not as something new, but as something deeply familiar, continuing the endless rhythm of life along the Nile.
The morning now settles fully into its steady shape. The sun is higher than before, no longer just arriving, but already established above the land, spreading a calm and consistent light across everything it touches. In the land of Egypt, the village has returned completely to its daily rhythm. There is no longer any trace of night in the feeling of the world, only the quiet continuation of morning life, unfolding slowly and naturally. Inside the homes, early tasks are already completed or nearing completion. Simple food has been prepared and shared in small portions. Water has been collected and stored in clay vessels that rest in shaded corners. The inside of each home feels settled again, organized in the familiar way that supports the rest of the day ahead. Outside, movement becomes more consistent.
Paths between homes and fields begin to fill again with steady footsteps, not crowded, not rushed, just a constant flow of people moving in familiar directions. In the distance, the Nile River continues its endless presence beside the village. Its surface now shines more clearly under the stronger sun, reflecting light in wider, brighter patterns that shift constantly but never stop. Boats move with more purpose again. Some carry goods, some carry people, some simply move along routine paths that have been repeated for generations. Ropes tighten and loosen. Wood creaks softly with movement. Water responds gently beneath every passing vessel. Nothing resists the river. Everything adapts to it. In the fields, the main work of the day begins again in full. This is the central rhythm of village life. The soil is worked carefully, shaped through repeated motion that has been practiced for generations without change. Hands guide tools through earth in steady cycles. Lift, press, turn, step, repeat. There is no need for instruction. The body remembers what to do. The land responds in quiet cooperation. A faint breeze moves through the open fields, carrying the scent of soil warmed by the rising sun. It is neither cold nor hot now, but somewhere in between, a balanced morning temperature that makes movement easier. Near the village edges, craftwork continues in shaded spaces. Clay is shaped into containers again. Surfaces are smoothed. Edges are refined. Each object takes form slowly, becoming useful not through complexity, but through careful repetition of simple actions. Nearby, woven materials are checked and repaired. Threads pass over and under in quiet patterns that repeat endlessly, forming structures that will hold grain, water, and daily life itself. Children move between these spaces, not as workers, but as observers of daily life. They watch, they follow, they pause. Everything around them becomes part of learning without words. The sun continues its steady climb. Shadows shorten slightly. Light grows stronger but remains calm. There is no harshness yet, only clarity. The world feels fully visible now, as if nothing is hidden anymore, and yet everything remains peaceful in its repetition. The village continues its rhythm without interruption. The fields continue their work. The river continues its flow. The homes continue their quiet order. And life along the Nile moves forward in its endless, steady cycle, unchanging, familiar, and deeply calm.
Late morning arrives slowly, almost without notice. The sun has now climbed higher into the sky over the land of Egypt, and its light has begun to change in quality. It is still calm, but it is no longer soft in the same way as early morning. It becomes clearer, more direct, and slightly warmer on the skin. The village continues its steady rhythm, but the feeling of the day shifts just a little. Everything is still familiar, everything is still slow, but the weight of midday is quietly approaching in the distance. In the fields, work continues without pause. The soil now feels drier on the surface, warmed by hours of sunlight. Tools move through it with practiced ease, guided by hands that do not need to think about each motion individually anymore. Lift, turn, smooth, press. The cycle continues again and again, as steady as breathing. Along the edges of the fields, small pauses appear where people rest briefly in shaded spots. Not long rests, just moments of stillness before returning to work. A sip of water, a quiet breath, then movement again. In the distance, the Nile River remains a constant presence, but now it is busier than before.
More boats are visible on its surface. Some travel slowly against the current, their movement careful and deliberate. Others drift with the flow, guided by the natural pull of the water itself. Goods pass along these routes: grain, clay containers, simple tools, and the quiet exchange of everyday needs between villages and settlements along the riverbanks. The sound near the river is different now, not loud, but layered. Soft calls between boatmen, the gentle scraping of wood, the low movement of water against hulls, all of it blending into a calm, continuous background. In the village, craft areas remain active. Clay work continues, with fresh pieces forming slowly under patient hands. Each vessel takes shape in stages, not rushed, not forced. It begins as soft earth, then becomes form, then becomes usefulness. Nearby, woven materials grow in number, stacked carefully in shaded corners, ready for later use or trade. Even in these tasks, the rhythm of the day remains steady. No single moment feels separate from the next. Everything flows together. As the sun rises higher, warmth increases gently. It is not harsh yet, but it begins to encourage slower movement. People adjust naturally. Work continues, but with more awareness of shade, rest, and water. The village adapts without needing instruction. It has always adapted in this way. This is how it survives. This is how it continues. And so, late morning becomes a balanced space between effort and quiet pause, between movement and stillness, between the cool memory of night and the stronger heat that will soon arrive. Life along the Nile continues in its steady pattern, unchanged and familiar, carrying the same rhythm that has shaped every day before this one. As late morning slowly stretches forward, the land begins to feel the full presence of the rising sun. Over the region of Egypt, the light is now steady and strong, no longer changing quickly, but holding the world in a consistent warmth. The shadows have become smaller, the air has become warmer, and the village begins to adjust once again, as it always does when the day moves closer to midday. In the fields, work continues, but the rhythm is no longer as constant as earlier. There are more pauses now, more moments of stillness between tasks. The soil feels drier under the sun, and movement becomes slightly slower, more deliberate, as bodies begin to conserve energy for the hotter hours ahead. Hands still guide tools through the earth, but the intervals between each motion grow a little longer. Lift, place, turn, pause, continue. This slower rhythm does not break the work, it simply changes its shape. Along the edges of the fields, shaded areas become more important. People begin to naturally return to these spaces for short rests, not full stops, but brief moments of relief from the growing heat. Water is shared more often now. Clay vessels are passed between hands. Small sips are taken quietly, without hurry. In the village itself, movement becomes less dense in open spaces. People begin to gather closer to shade, under simple coverings, near walls, or beside structures that block the direct sun. The sound of the village softens slightly, not because life has stopped, but because it has shifted inward, away from the brightest part of the day. Near the Nile River, activity continues steadily, but even there, a slower tone begins to appear. Boats still move, but with more caution. Work near the water continues, but often under shade or in carefully chosen spots where the sun is less direct. The river itself remains unchanged. It flows as it always does, constant, unhurried, unbothered by the heat above it. In craft areas, work continues with steady hands, but even these spaces begin to feel the influence of the rising warmth. Clay dries a little faster. Movements become slightly more measured. Tasks are adjusted to match the conditions of the air. Everything in the village is in quiet conversation with the sun now, not resisting it, not rushing against it, simply adapting to it. As midday approaches, the atmosphere becomes heavier, but not uncomfortable in a sharp way. It is more like a gentle weight settling over the land, a reminder that the day has reached its strongest point. And so, life continues in a slower, more careful rhythm. Work is not stopped, it is simply softened. Movement is not reduced, it is simply spaced. And the village remains in balance with the changing sky above it. A calm, steady existence, shaped by light, heat, and the endless flow of the river beside it. Midday arrives in a slow and complete way, as if the entire land has quietly agreed to pause its faster movements. Over the region of Egypt, the sun now sits high and steady, holding everything beneath it in a strong, unbroken warmth. The light is no longer soft, it is direct, it is full, and because of this, the world begins to quiet down in its own natural response. In the village, most movement shifts into shade. Open spaces that were active earlier now feel still and almost empty, not abandoned, just temporarily resting. Inside shaded courtyards and cool interior rooms, life continues in a slower form. People sit rather than stand. Work becomes minimal and careful. Hands move only when needed. Voices, when they appear, are low and spaced far apart, as if even sound is conserving energy. In the fields, the morning work has mostly ended for now. Tools are set down. Soil is left undisturbed, and the land itself rests under the heavy light of the sun, unchanged but still still, as if waiting for the cooler hours to return. Near the Nile River, the brightness of the water is stronger at this hour. The surface reflects the sun in wide, shimmering patterns that can feel almost endless to watch. Yet even here, activity becomes more limited. Boats remain, but many are stationary for a time. Ropes are tied, goods are covered or placed in shade. People stay close to the edges where the river offers slight relief from the heat. The river itself continues without change. It does not hurry, it does not pause, it simply flows, as it always has, through the center of everything. In the village homes, midday creates a different kind of atmosphere. The inside spaces feel more important now than in any other time of the day. Thick walls offer protection from the strongest sunlight. Clay surfaces hold a cooler temperature compared to the outside air. People gather quietly indoors, resting, sitting, or performing only the simplest tasks. Even time feels slower during this part of the day. There is no rush to move forward, only a gentle waiting. Outside, the air feels heavier and more still, not silent, but reduced. Birds are less active. Wind is faint or absent. Even distant sound seems softened by the heat. This is the deepest point of midday, a natural pause in the daily rhythm, not forced, not planned, but accepted by everyone and everything. And so, life in ancient Egypt settles into this quiet interval beneath the strong sun, resting briefly before the day begins its slow return toward movement again.
After the long stillness of midday, the land begins to change again in a very quiet way. In the region of Egypt, the sun is still strong, but it has started its slow descent from its highest point. The difference is not obvious at first. There is no sudden shift, no clear moment of change. Instead, it is something that unfolds gradually, almost unnoticed. The heat remains present, but the feeling of absolute stillness begins to loosen. In shaded spaces of the village, small signs of life return. A few people begin to move again, not quickly, but with the careful pace of someone testing the return of the day. A hand reaches for water. A body shifts from rest to sitting. A conversation starts quietly and then fades again. Outside, the light still feels heavy, but it is no longer at its strongest edge. In the fields, the first return of activity begins slowly. Not everyone at once, only a few at first. People step back into open areas with caution, as if checking whether the land is ready again for movement. The soil is still warm from midday, but it is no longer overwhelming. Tools are picked up again. Work resumes in a softer rhythm than the morning, more careful, more spaced out. Lift, turn, press, pause, then continue. The cycle returns, but with a calmer tone. Near the Nile River, movement also begins to increase once more. Boats that were still now shift slightly in the water. Ropes are adjusted. Small exchanges of goods resume along the riverbanks. The surface of the river reflects the sun differently now, still bright but less sharp than before. The glare softens just enough to make the water more comfortable to look at again. In the village, interior spaces slowly give way to outdoor life once more. Doors open wider. People begin to step outside in small groups. The sense of midday rest does not disappear completely, but it slowly fades into the background. Sound begins to return to the environment. Not loud, just present. Footsteps on packed earth, soft voices between neighbors, the distant movement of tools being used again. Even the air feels slightly lighter than before, though the warmth is still strong. This is early afternoon in its gentle form, a transition period between stillness and full activity. Nothing is fully fast, nothing is fully quiet. Everything exists in a balanced middle state. And in this balance, the village finds its rhythm again. Work resumes. Life continues, but always with awareness of the heat, the shade, and the steady flow of time moving forward along the river.
As early afternoon continues to unfold, the village settles into a steady return of activity. In the land of Egypt, the sun is still present and warm, but its intensity has softened just enough for life to feel easier again. The world is no longer in the deep pause of midday, and it is not yet approaching evening. It exists in a calm middle space where movement becomes possible once more without strain. In the fields, work resumes more fully now. The earlier caution slowly fades as people grow comfortable again with the returning rhythm. Tools are lifted with steady hands. Rows of earth are worked in familiar patterns. The sound of labor spreads gently across the open land, not loud or hurried, but consistent and continuous. The soil, still warm from the midday heat, responds differently now. It is softer at the surface, easier to shape, holding traces of heat, but no longer resisting movement as strongly as before. Lift, turn, smooth, continue. The cycle returns with quiet confidence. Along the banks of the Nile River, activity increases once more. Boats move again with purpose. Goods are transferred between shore and vessel. Ropes are pulled and secured. The river becomes a place of gentle coordination, where movement follows the natural rhythm of current and human intention working together. The water itself reflects the afternoon sky in long, shifting bands of light. It is still bright, but the glare is no longer overwhelming. There is a softness in the reflection that was not present at midday. Inside the village, life becomes more evenly distributed again. People move between homes, fields, and work areas in a steady flow. Craft spaces regain their rhythm. Clay is shaped again into containers, vessels, and simple forms needed for daily life. The process is slow and careful, with attention given to balance and consistency rather than speed. Woven materials are adjusted and completed in shaded corners where hands continue their repetitive motion without interruption. Even conversation begins to return more naturally now, still calm, still quiet, but more frequent than during the height of the sun. Children move more freely again, following paths between shaded areas and open spaces, observing the work of adults as the village resumes its familiar structure. The air in early afternoon feels slightly different from earlier in the day. Still warm, but less heavy. There is a subtle openness in it, as if the land itself is beginning to breathe more easily again. Shadows begin to stretch very slightly, though they are still short. It is a small reminder that the day is slowly moving forward, even if the moment feels steady and unchanged. Life continues in this balanced rhythm. Work is active but not intense. Movement is present but not rushed. Everything feels aligned with the slow passage of time along the river. And so, the village moves through early afternoon in a calm and steady flow, returning fully to life while still holding the quiet memory of midday rest. As the afternoon moves deeper, the light over the land begins to change again in a slow and gentle way. In the region of Egypt, the sun is no longer high and sharp. It has begun its quiet descent, and with it, the entire atmosphere of the world shifts into something softer. The heat is still present, but it no longer feels heavy in the same way. It becomes more even, more spread out, less demanding on the body. In the fields, the steady rhythm of work continues, but there is a noticeable easing in effort. Movements feel more natural again, less resistance in the air, less strain in each action. Hands guide tools through soil with a calmer confidence, as if the land and the worker have returned fully to understanding each other after the intensity of midday. Lift, place, smooth, repeat. But now each motion carries a quieter ease. Along the banks of the Nile River, the water reflects the changing sky with greater warmth and color. The harsh brightness of earlier hours has faded, replaced by a gentler glow that moves across the surface in long, calm lines. Boats continue to move, but the energy along the river is no longer about urgency. It becomes steady coordination, familiar routines, quiet exchanges that feel part of something older than memory. Ropes are handled with less tension. Cargo is moved in balanced, practiced motions. The river remains constant, as always, carrying everything forward without interruption or judgment. Inside the village, the feeling of the day begins to soften emotionally as well as physically. There is a subtle shift in mood, not happiness, not sadness, but a calm settling, as if the village has moved past the hardest part of the day and can now exist in a more peaceful flow of time. People begin to gather in slightly larger groups again. Work continues, but pauses between tasks grow a little longer. Conversations linger a little more. There is no rush to finish everything immediately anymore. The urgency of earlier hours has dissolved into patience. Children move more freely through open spaces, no longer restricted by the harshness of midday heat. Their presence adds a gentle sense of motion to the otherwise steady environment. In craft areas, the afternoon light becomes especially important. Clay surfaces now dry in a more controlled way. Shapes hold their form more clearly. Weaving patterns continue with consistent rhythm, each repetition building toward completion rather than beginning. Shadows lengthen slightly across the ground, not enough to signal evening yet, but enough to remind the village that time is moving forward. The air becomes more comfortable. A faint sense of coolness begins to mix with the lingering warmth of the day. This is late afternoon beginning to form, a time of balance, a time when work and rest begin to feel closer together. And in this quiet shift, life along the Nile continues with steady grace, moving gently toward the softer hours that will follow.
Late afternoon settles gently over the land, and everything begins to feel slightly closer to the end of the day. In the region of Egypt, the sun has started its slow, lowering movement, and the light it casts is no longer harsh or direct. It becomes softer, stretched, and warm in a way that feels calm rather than intense. The village responds to this change without effort. It simply adjusts, as it always does. In the fields, work continues, but now with a natural easing that comes with the approaching evening. The soil is no longer under the strongest heat of the day, and this makes movement feel lighter. Tasks that were slow in midday now feel smoother again. Hands move with steady repetition. Tools rise and fall in simple rhythm. The work is not rushed, it is not slow. It is balanced in a way that feels almost quiet in itself. Lift, turn, smooth, continue. Each action blends into the next without resistance. Along the banks of the Nile River, the water begins to reflect the afternoon light in deeper tones. The surface is still bright, but the color shifts slightly toward warmth and softness, as if the river is slowly preparing for evening as well. Boats continue their movement, but the flow of activity is calmer now. Less exchange, less urgency, more completion. Ropes are tied with a sense of finality for the day's tasks. Goods are stored more securely. Movements along the shore feel organized and familiar, as if each action is part of a long-standing evening routine. Inside the village, the atmosphere becomes noticeably more peaceful. The intensity of labor fades into a steady background rhythm. People begin to finish tasks one by one, not all at once, but gradually, like small waves settling after movement. Work areas begin to quiet. Craft spaces show signs of completion for the day. Clay items are left to dry. Woven materials are stacked neatly. Tools are placed in their resting positions. The air feels softer now. A gentle breeze begins to move through the village, carrying away some of the warmth that has lingered since midday. It is not cold, it is simply easing. Shadows grow longer and more noticeable across the ground. They stretch beside walls, across fields, and along the edges of pathways, marking the slow descent of the sun. Children begin to return closer to homes. Adults move with fewer tasks remaining. The sense of the day shifts toward closure, but not in a hurried way, more like a gradual release, a soft unwinding of activity. Even sound begins to change. Footsteps feel quieter. Conversations become slower and less frequent. The world feels less full, but more calm. Everything moves toward evening at its own steady pace, guided not by effort, but by time itself. And as late afternoon deepens, the village enters a quieter rhythm, preparing gently for the approaching sunset and the soft stillness that will follow.
The late afternoon slowly begins to fade into evening, and the entire world seems to soften in response. Over the land of Egypt, the sun lowers closer to the horizon, and its light changes into something quieter, warmer, and more stretched across the landscape. It is no longer the strong light of midday. It is not even the steady light of early afternoon. It becomes something gentler, as if the day is beginning to exhale. In the fields, work reaches its final stages. The last tasks of the day are completed with calm, unhurried movements. There is no pressure left in the rhythm now, only completion. Tools move through soil a few final times. Paths are cleared, small adjustments are made, and then, slowly, the work begins to end. One by one, people step back from the fields. Not suddenly, not together, but in a gradual return, as if the land itself is releasing them for the day. Along the banks of the Nile River, the surface of the water reflects the evening sky in longer and deeper tones. The brightness of earlier hours is gone. Now the river carries a softer glow, stretching horizontally across its surface, shifting gently with every movement of water. Boats move more slowly now, many already returning toward resting places along the shore. Ropes are secured, cargo is settled. The day's movement along the river begins to close, not with finality, but with familiarity. This is a rhythm known by everyone who lives beside it. In the village, evening transformation becomes more visible. Paths that were active during the day begin to quiet. People return from fields, craft spaces, and river edges, walking slowly back toward their homes. There is a sense of ease in these movements, a sense of completion. Homes begin to feel like the center of life again. Doorways open wider. Small fires are prepared for evening cooking. The smell of simple meals begins to rise once more into the cooling air. Inside shaded spaces, the last traces of daytime work are put away. Tools are stored. Materials are covered. Everything finds its place of rest. The air itself changes now. It becomes cooler, softer, and easier to breathe after the long warmth of the day. A light breeze moves across the village, carrying the faint sound of distant water and quiet movement. Shadows grow long and deep, stretching across every surface like slow-moving patterns of the day's end. There is a calmness here that feels different from the rest of the day. Not the stillness of midday, not the activity of morning, but something in between, a gentle pause before night. As the sun nears the horizon, the entire village slows to match its descent. And in this slow, fading light, life feels steady, familiar, and quietly complete. The sun now touches the edge of the horizon, and the world enters a softer, almost silent transformation. In the land of Egypt, the light becomes golden, stretched low across the fields and homes, as if the entire landscape is being gently wrapped in warmth one final time before night. Everything feels stiller now, not because movement has stopped, but because movement has slowed into something more delicate. In the fields, the last traces of activity fade completely. People are already gone from the open land, leaving behind only the quiet memory of their work in the turned soil and cleared paths. The earth rests again, not changed, just temporarily quiet. Along the banks of the Nile River, the sunset reflection becomes the center of the evening world. The river holds long streaks of gold, soft orange, and fading light that ripple gently with every movement of water. It is not bright anymore. It is glowing in a calm, fading way, as if the river itself is slowly closing its eyes. Boats near the shore are now mostly still. Some are tied securely. Some rest lightly against the current. The river continues its movement, but the activity around it has almost completely paused for the day. In the village, people gather inside their homes. Doorways remain open to allow the cool evening air to flow in. Small fires burn steadily, not large or bright, but enough to prepare food and bring gentle light into the gathering spaces. The smell of evening meals spreads slowly through the settlement, warm, simple, and familiar. Inside, the atmosphere becomes quieter in a comforting way. People sit together, talk in low voices, share food in simple portions. The day's effort is no longer present in action. It now exists only in memory, resting softly in the background. Outside, the sky continues to change. The golden light fades into deeper orange, then into soft red tones that stretch across the horizon. Shadows grow even longer, merging together in places where the ground and structures once looked separate. Now everything feels connected by the fading light. A gentle breeze moves through the village again, cooler now, more noticeable. It carries the scent of the river, the fields, and the last warmth of the day. There is a quiet satisfaction in this moment, not spoken, not named, just felt. The village has completed another cycle of the sun, and as the sky slowly prepares for night, everything begins to settle into a peaceful stillness.
The last light of the day slowly fades from the sky. In the land of Egypt, sunset has now fully passed, leaving behind a deep and quiet evening. The colors that once filled the horizon, gold, orange, and soft red, are now gone, replaced by a calm darkness that settles gently over the land. The village no longer moves in the rhythm of work. It now moves in the rhythm of rest. Inside the homes, small fires continue to burn with steady, quiet flames. They do not flicker wildly. They do not demand attention. They simply exist, giving soft light to the people gathered around them. Meals are finished. Voices become fewer. The weight of the day gently releases from every person who lived through it. Along the banks of the Nile River, the water becomes darker now, reflecting only faint traces of remaining light. The river continues its endless movement, but at this hour it feels almost invisible, as if it is flowing through silence itself. Boats rest quietly at their places along the shore. Ropes are still. Wood no longer creaks. Even the riverbanks seem to breathe more slowly now. Above, the first stars begin to appear, one by one, not in a sudden arrival, but in a gentle return, as if the sky is remembering its oldest patterns. The air becomes cooler, softer, and more still. Inside the village, people settle in to rest. Some lie down on woven mats. Some remain seated in quiet thought. Some listen to the faint sounds of the night outside, the distant water, the light movement of wind, the soft presence of a world that never fully becomes silent. Everything that was done during the day now feels far away, not gone, just complete. The village does not need to prepare for anything else. There is nothing left to finish, only rest, only quiet, only the steady continuation of life moving forward in cycles that repeat without urgency. And as the night deepens over the land of ancient Egypt, the world becomes still enough to feel timeless. The river flows, the stars watch, and the village sleeps, softly, calmly, as it always has, as it always will.